Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Ask Her Sisters in Solidarity, Amplifying Change Through Women's Foundations. It's so great to be back for our new series of Ask Her webinars. My name is Sarah Weatherby, Director of Communications for Washington Area Women's Foundation, and we are excited to have you join us today for a very special Ask Her featuring dynamic women leaders at the helm of women's foundations in our country. For those of you who are new to supporting the Women's Foundation, we are a community-supported organization committed to investing in the potential of women and girls of color across the Washington metropolitan region. We drive impactful community change through our grant making and advocacy using a gender and equity lens. Our grantee partnerships center the voices and lived experiences of women and girls of color, enabling us to influence policymakers and philanthropy. Today, we are honored to convene these formidable leaders who, through their foundations, share a common mission with us, the empowerment of women and girls. We will learn about their remarkable professional journeys and highlight the critical work their foundations are doing in their respective regions. Before we begin, we encourage you to engage with us and share your comments in the chat. We also invite you to ask any questions you have for our panelists using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. At the end of the discussion, we'll do our best to ensure our panelists have time to answer your questions. Finally, the Women's Foundation is less than 1 week away from celebrating our 25 years of empowering women and girls of color in our community. If today's conversation inspires you in any way, we invite you to join us by making a donation at thewomensfoundation.org/askher as we continue investing in organizations and initiatives that advance gender and racial equity. Thank you again for joining us. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our moderator for today, Dr. Tamara Lawson, President and CEO of the Women's Foundation.
Thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be here today. As the Women's Foundation celebrates its 25th anniversary in just 6 short days, it's also Hispanic Heritage Month, a month dedicated to celebrating the vibrant tapestry of the Hispanic and Latinx communities and their profound influence on our society. In the DC region, there's some cool stuff going on, y'all. There are many programs happening throughout the next 10 days, including the Latino Book Festival for a humanities nerd like me. That just got me really excited about what we can take our kiddo to. That's happening at the Martin Luther King Jr. Public Library this weekend. And Queer Siniera on October 10th, and we encourage you to seek that out, but also hope we all recognize that learning and engagement can and should happen year-round. And now, what a treat to be in community with all of you today to talk about women's foundations, which continue to play such an important role in this country. We work tirelessly to break down barriers and create a level playing field for women and girls from all backgrounds and all walks of life. As Women Foundation leaders, we believe when women and girls thrive, communities flourish and societies prosper. That's a fact. Our work is not just a mission, it's a movement towards a future where every woman's value is recognized and every girl's dreams are within reach. In a world where challenges faced by women and girls, especially those of color, are pervasive and complex, we stand united to face them head on, knowing genuine progress leaves no one behind, right? We have more than enough resources to ensure every woman, girl, and gender expansive person, regardless of circumstance, can enjoy high quality healthcare, housing, education, and make well above a livable wage to support their families. Before we dive deep into today's conversation, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the remarkable panelists we are all excited to have with us today. Joining us first is Ana Oliveira. Ana has been a voice and a force for change and improving the lives of those in the greatest need for more than 30 years. And I have to say, when I took on this role about 4 months ago, Anna is one of the people that folks within and outside of the foundation kept saying, have you met her? You need to meet her. You need to talk to her. As president and CEO, she leads the New York Women's Foundation's mission to create an equitable and just future for women and families. Under Anna's leadership, the foundation focuses on funding organizations by and for women of color, having constituted itself as the preeminent funder for gender and racial justice in New York. The foundation has also increased its presence in philanthropy, working side by side with other partners in 2 collaborative funds, the Girls and Young Women of Color Fund and the Justice Fund. The foundation has also co-founded a very successful and the first national collaborative that centers and focuses on young women of color, of which we're a part, and hosts the National Collaborative of the Young Women's Initiative with more than 11 foundations participating currently. Additionally, the foundation is a pioneer in igniting many cultural justice movements of today, including Me Too and the closing of Rikers Island. Anna has led critical cross-sectional partnerships to advance women's rights as a former New York City Commissioner of Human Rights and sits on the Independent Commission to Study Criminal Justice Reform in New York City. In early 2021, Anna joined the board of directors for Point Source Youth, a national nonprofit to end homelessness in 50 cities and towns in 10 years. She currently serves as an advisory committee member to the Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy, and has served as a board member for Philanthropy New York, and served on and chaired committees for Women's Funding Network. Anna was born in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and resides in New York. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being here. And finally, Bea or Bea. I always mess it up and I get nervous.
Both of them are good.
Which would you prefer today?
Bea.
Bea, okay. I was right the first time. Bea Vieira. Bea is the CEO of Women's Foundation California, where she leads the foundation's work to advance gender, racial, and economic justice. The foundation's program strategy is focused on building community-based power through investing in nonprofit organizations, training community leaders in policy advocacy, connecting key partners, and mobilizing significant financial resources. As with Anna, Bea has been in this work for quite some time. Prior to being appointed CEO in 2023, so we're newbies together, Bea served at the foundation for 5 years as chief strategist, ensuring that the work of the foundation was integrated, aligned, and impactful. She has served in the nonprofit and philanthropic sectors for over 20 years, including senior level positions at the Philadelphia Community Foundation and grant makers concerned with immigrants and refugees. Originally from Brazil, she is a longtime activist in women's LGBTQI and Latin, immigrant, and arts and culture issues. She is a recognized expert on culture change and gender, racial and economic justice issues, and is a frequent commenter on the power of women's philanthropy. Bea resides with her partner in Oakland, California. Welcome, Bea. So happy to have you both here. Let's get into it. And if after all of that, you all weren't clear about how powerful this conversation is going to be, I don't know what to say. So let's take on this first question. And Anna, I guess, would you like to go first? So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work of your foundation? I mentioned some of it in the introduction, but I know there are new things on the horizon. And so can you spend a little time talking about that?
First of all, thank you, Tamara, for having me, for having us. Thank you for being at the Washington Area Women's Foundation. You know, the foundation is a beloved partner of the New York Women's Foundation, and you are building on a terrific lineage of leaders and legacy of work. We just are so excited to continue to have, you know, together we can. And being together, with you and the foundation is a privilege. Also, congratulations on the anniversary. Quarter of a century is huge, and time matters, and continuity matters. And I'll use that to just say that the kinds of devotion to justice that the Washington Area Women's Foundation expresses, that we express at the New York Women's Foundation, that I know that Women's Foundation of California expresses, takes time. That kind of change takes time because it's very genuine change. It's very by and for with all of us in all of following, philanthropy, us following. So that's, tremendous appreciation for what you are doing, how you're leveraging this moment in the history of the foundation. So here in New York, there's an enormous privilege to work in philanthropy. It is my first job, probably my last job in philanthropy. And I always looked at philanthropy as a very compromised sector that is a result of profound inequalities and that needs to be working for its own demise. Working on the other side in community solutions, we observe that they're usually under-resourced. They're under-resourced, they're undervalued. So it was important for me to look at an opportunity to come to the side of controlling capital more, of controlling the destination of resources, of breaking this continuous under multi-centennial and underinvestment in communities of color, in women of color, in youth of color, in this perpetuation or this approach to change that is in the future as opposed to now. So for me, it's a privilege to be able to be at the New York Women's Foundation. Like the Washington Area Women's Foundation, women's foundations are very close to people. They are very close to the ground. There's not this us them thing, Most of us are firsts in our staff, in our lives, and we are so intentional about the purpose of the work we do. Like you, the foundation follows our grantee partners. We've had the privilege to have organizations working for the liberation of the system of criminalization in the lives of all of us come to us and say, we need you to join us. And that's how the Justice Fund got created. We had the privilege of Girls for Gender Equity coming to us and saying, we need to do something for our girls, and we need philanthropy there. And that's how the Fund for Girls and Young Women of Color happened. So what's happening here now? We have an opportunity to be more significant in New York. New York faces incredible opportunities to show that the economic abundance that we have in the city can be shared, that there is no reason for us to have people that are unhoused, that there is no reason for us to have suffering in our people. Philanthropy is for the good of humanity. And we got to begin with our closest humanity, right? And everything is local. Of course, it's national and global and regional, but everything is rooted locally. So I think that the things that are in the horizon for us are around leveraging the energy of our grantee partners, around the issues of movements of people. I'm not talking about movements of people, not just migrants or immigrants, because we have the dislocation of people in New York. The gentrification in Brooklyn, for instance, has dislocated enormous numbers of Black residents, and we don't want to not look at things together. It's the same experience of losing our place. It's the same experience of success, not including our own peoples. So we'll be doing something around that. And we will continuing the work with Closing Rikers, although we don't have a favorable partnership with the current city administration on that. Philanthropy and us continue determined to do that. We believe that the horrific violent conditions are unneeded. And we look forward to, also continuing to partner, learn from you and from everyone. How? Because I know you are a vital, vital, vital part of the solutions in the Washington area.
Thank you so much, Anna. There was a lot there, and I'm gonna resist the temptation to dive in because I want to make sure that Vieira has an opportunity to answer that question, recognizing that we'll come back to some of those themes in the rest of our conversation. So Vieira, what's happening in California? Tell us a little bit.
Well, first, I want to echo Anna's welcome to you. We are, at the Women's Foundation California, super excited to have you in our midst. And I'm really excited to be a support, to be supported, and doing some good advocacy and creating some good trouble together. So welcome, and felicidades for the 25th anniversary. That's really fantastic. And anyone who's been part of organizing and being part of an organization knows that every year, is a year, and it takes a lot to keep going, and to not only keep going, but thriving and really with values and integrity. It is hard. So congratulations. We're very excited that you are there and that you are thriving. And we will continue to work in partnership for sure. And in terms of California, and in terms of us, it's always, as soon as Anna went first, I was like, oh, how am I going to follow Anna? Because Anna is always so, you're just so beautiful, Anna, in the way that you express things, in the way that you talk with such integrity, but also passion, but also authenticity about what you're talking about and what the work that you are doing. And frankly, that is why this is work that this community of folks, so women and gender expansive people, are so important to me, to us, to our team, to our grant partners, to our communities, because it really is so rooted in love. It's rooted in love, it's rooted in believing in people. There are names in philanthropy for these things that is like trust-based philanthropy, all of those things. Those are all names that really say we know ourselves, we trust in ourselves, and it's rooted in love for our communities. So in California, I feel it's not just in California, but in California, we see some of the trends, of course, that we see nationally, but that we also see across the Americas, which is the anti-gender attacks, which really are connected to everything that we're seeing for the ultra-right and the white supremacy uprising, and really the attacks on democracy. So it's all tied together. So when we think about our work, we are thinking that, as Anna said, that the issue of movement is also the movement of ideas. It's the movement of oppression. It's the movement of having to have resistance. Things happen locally, but they are truly connected to each other. So we're both continuing to invest locally with our grant partners, with our policy institute. We're looking at advocacy and policy change and systems change, but we're also looking at culture change and narrative change, because we do know that policy and systems in itself is not enough, as we just saw with Roe versus Wade. falling and all of many other things, and including also voter rights and voter registration, and like it's all tied together. So for us, it's very important to be both rooted locally, but connected nationally and internationally, because movements are, particularly movements like Native movements that are really looking at climate change, which also impacts how you think about sustainable economies in California, are, those are all movements that are not just about the United States, that are inspired by everything that's happening. And at the same time, paying attention to what are the local, each locality. California is a huge state, is the fourth economy in the world. So it's a huge, it's just a challenge and a huge opportunity as well. In terms of each section, each part of the state is quite different. So what each locality is experiencing and what works for the Central Valley is not going to work for the true North, which is on the border with Oregon, and it's not going to work with the border with Mexico. So there's a lot for us to do, but we are really committed to investing in grassroots organizations and grassroots leaders that are working on advocacy, policy change at the local, state, and the state level, and those who are also working on strategies for narrative and culture change, both locally and nationally as well.
Thank you, Vieira. And there were some themes in what both of you shared that I think are good. I'm going to use the next question to tap into those. And I was going to ask you about, some examples of local programs, but we can weave those into the balance of the conversation. And I want to get to this next one, which is about intersectionality in our work. So I'm curious to hear your perspectives on the degree to which the philanthropic sector is leaning in to the intersection of race and gender and economic status in their funding. Within the last 20 to 25 years, I do think there's been more of a concerted effort to move away from siloed discussions, but we've got a lot of ground still to cover. And lots of folks that just don't understand how what happens in a neighborhood, as Anna mentioned, where folks are being displaced, has a direct connection to access to quality education, right? And what connects those two things are wellness and safety. It's all there. If a little girl is not well-fed or nourished, she's not going to be able to pay attention in school. If it takes her 45 minutes to get to school, she's losing out. And if her home consists of temporary housing because she's unhoused, like all of those things play together. And we need a philanthropic sector that understands that. So I'm just curious to hear whether you think the sector is leaning in the right direction and understands the very specific impact that those intersections have on women and girls of color.
I can start. So the sector is wide and very different. So it depends on what part of the sector you're talking about. So I think, for example, one of the advantages of being in this part of the women's funds is that we are in this very privileged and at the same time fertile space where we are really thinking about how to resource communities from the community's needs and solutions that they are coming with or coming forward with. So we are not creating solutions for communities, we're coming with communities, but at the same time, we are mobilizing and influencing how different parts of the philanthropic sector works and functions. So I would say, yes, there is some leaning into it. It depends on the sector. I think for folks like us, where we have more connection and more flexibility, we can create more change more quickly. And I think for, private, larger, nonprofit, philanthropic organizations, it's different, and each one of them is in a different place of their own journey. And I think that that is part of our work as well. That is a big part of our work. That is partly we are here to influence, to bring some new voices, to bring new leadership to the sector, that, that, as Anna said, if you think about it, these are dollars that should have been tax dollars that have not been used in the tax base. The philanthropic dollars are dollars that then are dollars that are being decided on how to be used by sometimes a very small group of folks. So we do want to think about that, and how to influence that. And at the same time, thinking about what Anna said about having control over resources and financing, and really figuring out, like, how is it that we also look at all the investments, meaning the endowments, how the endowments are being invested, how for those large part of the sector that has it, how does it come back to community, and how do we then, as women's funds, have a different way of thinking of investment as well?
Really thoughtfully stated. I appreciate that, Vieira. Anything to add, Anna?
I would say that the philanthropic sector at large is catching up. Does the philanthropic sector at large center racial justice, center economic justice, and gender justice, disability justice, environmental justice? I think that it's catching up. I think that it's reluctantly catching up at times. Just this week, listening to incredible other leaders, this case, Lorelei Williams, talk about the commitments that were made by philanthropy in general, in face of the assassinations of, Breonna Taylor and George. This is like coming, an eruption of a tip of an iceberg, right, of racial injustice and racism. So on the tip, the water goes down a little bit, so a tip comes up. We pay attention. The world pays attention temporarily, and philanthropy made these commitments, but most of the commitments are not being kept. So I would say that it's a reluctant integration. In gender, we know that 2% of philanthropic dollars come to, women. And then you look at women of color, what is that? Less than 1%. So I'm going to say that there is a listening. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say that there are some good intentions, but I think that we can do so much better.
One of the things I feel like I hear both of you saying is that we are poised as women's foundations to hold the sector accountable in productive and constructive ways, right? You both tapped into themes of it's a journey, and there's growth And I think what I'll add to that is we need to expedite the rate of that growth, given promises that were made, and even more important, given the need. I think people may get tired of hearing me say this, but it's important. 3.5+ years into this pandemic, we still don't have our arms around how much damage was done and layered on top of the need. And so we got to pick up the pace. And as leaders of these wonderful foundations, I think we are poised to use that privilege, I believe you mentioned, Via, for the good of the women and girls that we are serving. And I don't like the phrase voiceless, but for those who are disenfranchised, right?
And Tamara, I think the other role, I mean, you said it's important for us because we are holding folks accountable. And I think it's also, I just want to say that we need to hold ourselves accountable as well, because we are also, as a movement, as women's funds, we all are in different points of the journey as well. So I think that's also important. And I feel that, I mean, it's important for us to really continuously look at how we're doing, what we're doing. Sometimes how you do it is just as important as what you're doing. And then also, who are the folks that we're bringing in to our community, to inside, and really thinking about that, and really being in community as well with gender expensive folks in a very intentional and really powerful way.
And I wanted to add a dimension to this conversation, which is, frankly, there is no mission that any foundation can achieve, any foundation can achieve, if it does not center women, cis, trans, gender expansive, women of color in all of our arrays. Those who are closest to the challenges are the best solution makers. It doesn't matter if it is an environmental mission. Mm-hmm. Who are the folks that are most affected by it? Yeah. Are the named above folks. It doesn't matter if it's educational, if it is economic, if it is, the developmental, economic development. So I think it also has to do with being effective. Yes, it has to do with doing the right thing, but it has to do with delivering. It has to return on investment. We all like to ensure our community partners and our donor partners that we are producing the best returns on investments to solutions. So if we don't do that, the return is so small. The return is temporary. Then we don't have, we say, it's not working. Yes, because we are not centering the voices, the solutions, the thinking. We are not centering the folks that actually are in it and on a daily basis, by definition, are creating solutions. Mm-hmm. So I think, for us in philanthropy, there is the thing of evidently our mission, our ethics, the fact that these dollars actually are here because of a system of extraction, but they should be in community. So we are redirecting them, but also we got to deliver to our donors, to our boards, to our communities. We got to deliver their return. And that means being very inclusive and listening to the solutions that are there. There was one question about how do we select grantee partners? Proximity. We are close. Women's foundations are public foundations. We are people's foundations, and we are close to people. So our job is to see. Our job is to be able to recognize the abundance of ingenuity, of emerging solutions, and to bring an added value. So how do we do that? We go to communities, we talk with people. People once hear about us, there's something very powerful is people are very networked. People are connected. Communities and solidarity networks are really the primary agents that ensure people's survival and thriving, right? Philanthropy is always a little late. We're always a little late. What we want to do is not be so late, right? So we select based on knowing people, and we select with a share of vision. We tend to fund those that nobody will touch because they are perceived or they're not tested yet.
Yeah.
And we are perceived as taking a risk, but the reality is that the embrace of the relationship that we have, the embrace of the seeing and learning and being there, being clear about what is our added value, is not to tell people what to do, is to listen to people and say, what are they saying they need? What is the exposure and access that we can bring that by definition people have been barred from, very difficult to be seen. So I think that it's the effective thing for philanthropy to do, in addition to being the right thing to do.
Thank you, Anna. Just as a continuation of that, I wanted to get a sense that at our foundation, we have participatory grant making that is a part of our Rockstar Fund. And so are there some examples of what's happening in New York or what's happening in California that will help some of the folks listening in understand how we're in a continuous process of centering women and girls of color? Like, what does that look like on a practical level within our foundations?
Yeah, so for us, we will not invite a group to submit a proposal if we don't know that they can be funded. So we are not going to have an RFP that says there is this funding and 50 people apply and only 2 can get funding. We just don't do that because it's a lot of wasted resources having to produce these proposals. And then anyway, so what we do is we look at our programs. Particularly right now, we're looking at our Policy Institute, which is 20 years old. We have 600 folks who have gone through the Institute. There's a huge network. We've changed 52 laws in the state of California. And these are grassroots leaders that are coming from our grant partners and some folks who are not our grant partners. So we're looking as a strategy is supporting the fellows, of course. It's a 1-year, 9 months fellowship program that is quite intensive. So we support it. It's free for the fellows. But now we're also looking at how do we support the organizations to be able to let go of someone who is also doing a project for the organization, but also, that doesn't have somebody to support the rest of the work that person was doing, and to make sure that folks have capacity to even send their staff to a program like the Policy Institute. With the project that we work in collaboration with you all, with the National Young Women's Initiative, we are also looking at what are the organizations that are youth serving organizations across the state that are also supporting leadership development. They're supporting advocacy. They're supporting all of this opportunities for our young folks and really supporting those organizations. So we are, in some ways, really thinking about how is it that we function holistically, so that if folks are coming in, are being supported through one of our doors, they also have many other supports, because the organizations, as Anna said, most of the organizations where funding are less resourced and have a lot less capacity. And many times we're the first funder, many still today. But one of the things that we always say, like we were even the first funders for the Dolores Huerta Foundation, because even Dolores Huerta had a hard time getting initial funding for the pandemic.
Which is ridiculous.
ridiculous. So I'm very proud of that. So, but anyway, so I don't know. That doesn't quite answer your participatory grant question.
No, it didn't have to be participatory grant making. I used that as an example of what we're doing in our foundation, but there are many. That answer was fantastic.
Right.
Anna, is there anything you want to add to that you haven't said already? So and I just really quickly, that for the folks who are listening in, the three of us likely take for granted that centering is the thing, right? That it is the way to go about our work. But I just want to set some context to that. Unfortunately, in 2023, it is, we are often an anomaly in this space.
Right.
Because there are plenty of people doing this work,
yes,
that don't go about it in this way. So forgive the interruption, but I wanted to say that.
Yes. And this issue of proximity, because we're talking about proximity, right? The closeness, the proximity, the permeability of foundations and community, right? We're talking about, how do we do that? Through participatory grant making, community folks deciding where the dollars are going. They come, they join a group, they get trained. We have a training, we have a manual. We talk about what the goals are. We talk about people read proposals, people read budgets, people read the mission, and then people go to site visits, because the site visits are so important, because you're present to people and you see. Proposals are really important too, but even the access to writing good proposals already selects people out, right? So we engage people, community people, activists, others to do that. We also, in the funds that we have, the collaborative funds, we have advisories that are solely with people with lived experience, the experts in the topics. And we are benefiting from people's knowledge. So for us, it's a consultant like any other consultant. And evidently, our community leaders and experts are paid to do that when they advise us. We also, how do we do outreach? It was a little bit more of that question. So we attend community events. We attend events in our grantees, with their own events, but we also attend if there is a coalition meeting on, as I was talking about, fragile housing, in New York. So we will attend, we will introduce ourselves, we will, following what Vieira was saying, we don't want people to be working to write grants that we're not going to fund. So we have a lot of what we call get together and meeting each other, interest meetings, sometimes in community sites, sometimes in our own offices. We, how else do we do outreach? There are weekend events, there are fairs in New York, they are important. So we go, and we need to be present where people are. We need to be seen beyond what we already see, right? It doesn't mean that every time we do that, there's a funding thing, but it does mean that it keeps telling us, what is that edge of inclusion? What is that edge of what's really significant for people that is not making to the news,
right.
that it's so important. So I would say that sometimes, Tamara, and I know that you do that work is invisible in philanthropy.
Yes.
And it's so important to value that, because we talk about trust-based philanthropy. Trust is not built in theory. Trust is built with consistency, with reliability, with I say it and I do it. And if I'm here today, I will be here tomorrow. You are not just a fed for me, you community member, you grantee partner. So that's how we do the outreach. That's how we do the in-reach in us. And just one comment. For us, the alignment of our board membership, of our staff, of our grantee partners, that kind of proximity has been a journey. And it's a very important, intentional journey. Because we think that if that table has all those tables, have that expertise, we will be doing a better job.
Thank you, Anna. And I appreciate you've used the word proximity multiple times. And it's something I'm going to take away from this conversation and include in my vocabulary moving forward. And just want to name, before we transition to Q&A, that another way that we are highlighting proximity to our grantee partners. I'm proud that our program officers have worked to make sure that our application process is seen as iterative, right? It's not finite. We have sought feedback and then been responsive to that feedback so that we know what is working for the folks who have to go through that process, Vieira, right? To make sure that it is relevant, that it's accessible, and that honestly, it's as easy as possible for them to share with us what their needs are. It should be easy. That process shouldn't be as difficult as it often is in the sector. So Sarah is not going to be happy with me, but I just want to see if I can get a quick answer to one challenge that you want to name. You don't even have to say much beyond that challenge, and one thing that's giving you hope about the work of women's foundations. And I'll start with you, Vieira.
Okay. I think one of the big challenges right now is that as we move towards the 2024 elections, that resources are really retracting. We have really seen that at a time when resources really need to be expanding, because this is the time to invest in our communities. This is the time to really continue to look at how democracy is being threatened. And so I am very concerned about that. I'm very worried about that. Our partners are worried about it. Our donors are talking about it, our donor partners. And I think, the thing that's giving me a lot of hope is you can see that I'm in a hotel room and there's a bed behind me. So I'm in Sacramento because this is our first retreat for our Solis Policy Institute. It's the 21st retreat, the 21st cohort class. So this week, it's just been, we're in the honeymoon phase because it's the first retreat. Nobody's super tired yet, and everybody's excited to meet everybody. But there's like 35 people here, all like 99% women, gender expansive, of color, in Sacramento, learning how to change policy at the state of California. And we spent the days together. We had dinner together. We had this, it's like, all right.
You're building community. That's beautiful.
That is why we do this work, because look at this. And building space at state houses for folks that usually are not in these spaces is huge.
It is huge.
It's huge. And it's definitely what we need to keep democracy alive.
Thank you, Vieira. Okay, Anna, last words before we transition.
Ditto on the challenge, but women's foundations are known for going against the tide. So, and I know that the folks that are joining us here today are here because you're also going against the tide. What is the tide? The tide is that contamination of fear and that sense of that we don't have enough. We are very abundant people. We understand that. We have strength in spirit, strength in numbers. And actually, when we put our resources together, we can respond. So it's the same thing. It's a challenge and it's an opportunity. And I think that I'm excited about the opportunity that we have to work with the Washington Area Women's Foundation again and again and again, because you're leveraging this moment, to also to build now and build the future, So it's all the challenges are mostly excitement.
Thank you for that. I don't know if you all saw me. I started typing. I always feel like if I don't take down at least one or two of the amazing things that Anna says, I'm going to kick myself. So I just took a second and wrote down, we swim against the tide, because that's absolutely accurate. Okay, so I ate into the Q&A a little bit, but let's see here. Let's go with a question from Susan. Do you consider policy work as your primary focus over organizations involved in direct services to women? Great question.
I'm just going to say very simply, we don't make that distinction. Our grantee partners don't make that distinction. What I mean is they are first responders in their communities by definition. They are trusted, they are nimble, they do what's needed. So they're always providing services, right? They're always meeting a gap, but they are meeting that gap in a very transformation and inclusive way with their members, with their constituents, even if they're not a membership organization. And what we notice is that people sometimes self-define as advocates, as organizers, as providing for today. And so during COVID, people provided for the immediate needs, but they also organized their constituents to make changes in how the city was responding, how the state was responding. So those lines from a community point of view are more integrated and blurred than they are sometimes in the theory of the funding for us.
Yeah, that is true for us as well. And as somebody who ran a social service organization for many, many years, you know, yes, we provided direct service and we were also doing advocacy and we were also creating policy. So we don't make that distinction.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back here and grab, let's see. I'm looking for any additional questions. And I am pretty sure I saw that Susan had submitted two. But I'm not seeing another one. So that leads me to want to ask a question that actually I was in conversation with some dynamic women leaders in the nonprofit and philanthropic sector just last night. And we were talking about the future of leadership. And because of some of the things that both of you have named, it's a time that is fertile, to use one of your words, Bia, with possibility, right? Challenge, of course, brings opportunity, which is a cliche I'm not often excited to hear, but it happens to be true. There's a lot going on. And we are operating in a hostile climate. And so the conversation we had last night was, you know, what is our responsibility to open space and make the sector better for women leaders coming behind us, particularly women leaders, women and gender expansive leaders of color. So if you'll indulge me, you know, has the leadership pipeline been on either of your minds? I am mindful of it often, and just to be frank, a little nervous about what it must look like to people coming up behind us.
Yeah, you know, this came up actually this week as part of the retreat. One of the California senators, Holly Mitchell, who termed out and is on our board, is now a supervisor for LA County. And Holly Mitchell has always said, every time I leave my position, I make sure that there's somebody behind, that I have supported somebody or somebody's to take my position. So that's number one. And I think that if you think about, that's a very specific thing for Holly Mitchell and the California Senate and blah, blah, blah. But, for women of color, for women, for gender expansive folks, if you don't have that kind of intention to bring folks in, it doesn't happen. It just really doesn't happen. The senator who took her place, who used to be her chief of staff, who was voted in, spoke with our class, and she said, I need a pipeline. I cannot hire staff in my offices that are people of color. I need to know I need to talk to you about all of this network of folks that you have. Because if you're interested in that work, that's a pipeline. We just went through a leadership transition. Serena, who was our CEO for almost 10 years, just stepped down, and I came internally. And really, that was a pipeline development. Of course, we need to think about that, because one is we need more. There's always a need for more folks, more like us, different than us, pushing us. And we also, it doesn't happen if we don't do it. It just really doesn't. And there's no, in philanthropy specifically, I've only worked in public foundations, partly because that's where my passion is, because I know the money is not one person's or one particular thing, is community money, but it's also the entry point for women and women of color and people of color. And it's because in the pecking order is more it's seen as more marginal. So there is a way in which that we really need to think about that and work towards this pipeline.
Any closing thoughts, Anna?
So if I can, I'll just say that it has to be very intentional, as Vieira is saying. And I wonder, Tamara, if I could also make a comment to begin to answer Tracy Gary's super important question. First of all, Tracy, it's an honor that you are here. I just want everybody to know that we stand on the shoulders of incredible women, beginning with Tracy, because women's foundations had founders, and Tracy is one of them. The understanding of women's philanthropy, everything. So thank you. It's an honor that you are here. I hope that you feel a little proud of the fruits of your work. That's what I want to say. But here, your question is super important. I think women's foundations, it's about how do we engage white donors? How do we engage folks that have been at this for a while? Look, I belong to that 50+ group. So let me say first, I think that this women's foundations, we are practicing this paradigm that inclusion of others doesn't mean devaluing of who was there before. That inclusion is inclusion for everybody, right? That there is an abundance in the concept of inclusion. There's an abundance that table is not that supremacist table that says we only have 7 seats. And if I put you there, I'm going to take you other people here out. So I think that it's been a very important conversation. I want to thank you for raising that, because all of us have a shared challenge, which is what is our meaning and significance in the world now, right? So if we detach our meaning and significance from being the only one, from being the one that has more resources, from being the one that has accrued pre-existing credibility, if we detach our value from the very systems that we work against, then we can be at the tables in this shared discovery of how do we do it together, right? So very intentionally here at the New York Women's Foundation, our board is an inclusive board, and we're always pushing ourselves, because inclusion implies exclusion, right? And so who is not there? And we are very aware of who is not there. But the role of Caucasian women at the foundation, the role of all of our donors is really important. And it's so important for us to cultivate that either or thing, you know, that in and of itself is an instrument that works against us, all of us, right? No matter who we are. So I wanted to say that because I see my colleagues teaching me how to do that in their foundations. Should be an open conversation for all of us. And also the multi-generational thing, right? The idea that we become obsolete. You know, I don't know what number it is these days. It used to be 50, could be 60, I don't know. But we become obsolete. Also the reverse side, right? If you're not with a certain level of experience, what you say also doesn't matter, right? I mean, we inherited this nonsense.
Yep.
That is so, it's a poison, right?
And it doesn't apply to men, Anna.
Oh, yes, doesn't apply to men, exactly. And you know, if we're funding movements, if we're funding the world that we want to have now, we change that now. You know, we create ourselves. We have to create inquiries because nobody's doing this. So creating anew and creating with the spirit of, let's keep, you know, fine tuning it. Let's keep, you know, in that way. But, you know, Tracy, thank you again. You know, this is another example of you moving us forward. Thank you again.
I think that is a wonderful note to end on, just this notion that part of our work as leaders is to sit in the discomfort of, right? Sit in the discomfort of some of these narratives and conversations in order to keep the work moving forward. So Bia, Anna, thank you so much for your critical leadership. Thank you for being here today. I know there are a million other places you could have been, and I feel honored that you chose to hold this space with me and with everyone who joined us. I'm going to put in a plug again for our 25th anniversary celebration happening next week, and hope that all of you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week and have a healthy and safe weekend. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Rocket in your anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you both. Thank you. Take care, everybody.